We are told that Noah practiced husbandry. In this case, we can see signs of animal husbandry. Some fences are more prominent than others, but they are all in straight lines. Uphill, behind Noah's home, is this large altar that he would have used to sacrifice animals to the Lord. It is approximately 10 feet in diameter and has a cube-like shape. In conclusion, we can say that the Darupanar, Noah's Ark formation, is full of evidence which confirms its authenticity, especially when we objectively consider all the information. Many books have been written about the discovery of the Ark. It has been featured in many newspapers and television programs, but most of the world is not aware of this beautiful discovery, which refutes evolution and proves the Bible to be truth. In God's timing, He will reveal this to all mankind. The Red Sea Crossing. Egypt is steeped with a grand history of ancient science, technology, and beautiful structures. But is there evidence of the children of Israel ever living there? Many years ago, this large stone was discovered in the first cataract of the Nile on Elephantine Island. The inscription states, "For 7 years, there had been no satisfactory inundation of the Nile. As the result of this, grain of every kind was very scarce. In this terrible trouble, King Chesser remembered the god Imhotep, who had once delivered Egypt from a similar calamity." Imhotep can be found in Egyptian history in many places, and it appears he was a sage who was elevated to a god over a period of centuries after his death. Perhaps most confident was Imhotep, the architect who probably conceived of building Zozer's tomb completely from stone. Known as a sculptor, a priest, a healer, Imhotep is considered the preeminent genius of the Old Kingdom. Imhotep had even saved his country from famine. Could Imhotep and Joseph have been one and the same person? We head to Saqqara, Egypt, a short distance south of Cairo. This is where the first pyramid was built in ancient Egypt. It is called the Step Pyramid due to the distinct levels in its shape. We can see where a smooth veneer layer of limestone had once been applied over the brick, creating a smooth surface, but most of it has since been removed. Here is where we find the statue of Pharaoh Zoser, under whom Imhotep served. It was on the base of this statue of Zoser that Imhotep was mentioned as a man, not as a god. He was first after the king, with his cartouche shown here. At the complex of buildings, the main hall is of importance to us. It was here and in other locations in Egypt that Joseph saved his country from famine. Then Joseph said to Pharaoh, "Indeed, 7 years of great plenty will come throughout all the land of Egypt, but after them, 7 years of famine will deplete the land." In Joseph's day, as one entered the building, they would make their way down this hallway to purchase grain. There would be many cashiers available for customers of various languages to trade for the much-needed food. The famine was all over the face of the earth, and Joseph opened all the storehouses and sold to the Egyptians. As we exit the hallway through the area in the rear, we see over on one side a series of deep structures where grain was stored underground during the 7 years of plenty. Then over the next 7 years, it was sold to the Egyptians and visitors from other countries. A system of vertical underground silos created a cooler environment for the grain to be stored. This was the design of the genius, Joseph. When grain was removed from storage, the oldest grain was carried up by way of this long descending stairway. The grain silos were interconnected via tunnels, which allowed the grain to flow down to a central exit point located at the bottom of this stairway. A record of this event of removing the grain can be seen on hieroglyphics such as this at Thebes, showing the sacks of grain being carried up the stairs from the granaries. Another example of this can be seen at the tomb of Iti. As a way to honor the Lord of Heaven, Joseph built this first pyramid in Egypt at Saqqara to show his thankfulness to the Lord for honoring him and saving the Egyptian people from famine. In that day, there will be an altar to the Lord in the midst of the land of Egypt. Centuries later, many other great pyramids were built in Egypt, following the lead of Joseph or Imhotep. 2.3 million large blocks of stone, weighing 2 to 3 tons each, were used in the largest pyramid, causing some to wonder how they could have been constructed using ancient technology. It has been a mystery for centuries. Ron Wyatt conducted a great deal of research on the subject to help shed light on this puzzle. He read the account of Herodotus, who wrote, "The stones intended for use in constructing the pyramids were lifted by means of a short wooden scaffold. Lifting devices were provided for each step." Mr. Wyatt noticed lift devices in hieroglyphics. These lift devices would have been placed on each side of stones that were to be raised. At Saqqara, we can see hieroglyphics of 3 lift machines next to a pyramid shape, linking the two together. Large wooden levers were found in King Tut's tomb that were used in the machines. A series of these levers were placed alongside the blocks to be raised and would operate in unison. A large stone was loaded onto the machine, then the levers on each side were pulled downward by ropes tied to turning winches, thus raising the stone block as needed. When the block was raised to the proper height, it was rolled onto the next level and then raised again. A series of lift machines would have been utilized. Mr. Wyatt demonstrated this type of lift machine to Mr. Nassif Hassan, head of the Egyptian Antiquities Organization of Cairo. The demonstration was filmed by Japanese Nippon Television and later aired in Japan. This lift machine appears to be a simple solution to the mystery of constructing the pyramids. When Moses was a baby, his adoptive Egyptian mother was Hatshepsut, and Moses' name was Senmut. The serpent on his forehead signifies his title of prince. As an adult, Moses' Egyptian name was Tutmosis II. A side profile of Moses demonstrates his distinctive Hebrew-shaped nose. After Moses killed the Egyptian, he fled from Egypt and its territories for fear of the current Pharaoh. When Pharaoh heard of this matter, he sought to kill Moses. But Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. Moses was married and then had a son, whose name described their foreign home. He called his name Gershom, for he said, "I have been a stranger in a foreign land." This tells us Moses was not in any area controlled by the Egyptians. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. And the angel of the Lord appeared to him in a flame of fire from the midst of a bush. The Lord told Moses to bring the children of Israel back to this mountain outside of Egypt. After 10 plagues had struck Pharaoh and the Egyptians, he finally agreed to let Moses take the children of Israel from Egypt. Based upon the research he conducted, Ron Wyatt believed that the Pharaoh of the Exodus was Amenhotep III. Here we see Amenhotep receiving the Ankh as a type of power and new life being infused into his body. Mr. Wyatt speculated that Amenhotep's eldest son was Tutankhamun, and that he was killed by the destroying angel in the 10th plague. Tut would have been the crown prince and co-ruler with his father at that time, in the late 18th dynasty in 1446 BC. Surprisingly, in the Biblical Archaeology Review, it stated that the majority of archaeologists do not believe in the Exodus from Egypt. Tradition has told us that the Exodus from Egypt led the children of Israel to the Sinai Peninsula, but no evidence has been found of their having been in that location for 40 years. Also, tradition has said that the children of Israel crossed the Red Sea in an area that does not match the biblical account. Could the bitter lakes be the Red Sea spoken of in the Bible? Could thousands of soldiers all drown in relatively shallow water? The traditional Mount Sinai, Jebel Musa, is located in the southern mountainous area of the Sinai Peninsula. This mountain was chosen by Helena, the mother of the Roman Emperor Constantine, in the 4th century. It was not chosen by any archaeological evidence at the site, but was based upon the dreams of Constantine, and subsequently chosen by Helena as Mount Sinai. Later, in the 6th century, the Emperor Justinian built St. Catherine's Monastery at the foot of the mountain to establish a sense of authenticity to the site. This is tradition, but what is the truth? Let's break out of a man-made story and ask the question, should tradition supersede the Bible? What does the Bible tell us about the Exodus from Egypt? The children of Israel were living in the best of the land of Ramses, as Pharaoh had commanded. This area is the fertile Nile Delta in northern Egypt. And Israel dwelt in the land of Egypt, in the country of Goshen. This also describes the fertile Nile Delta. The Nile Delta is shown here at the northern termination of the Nile, full of lush vegetation, in contrast to the surrounding desert. On the night of Passover, the firstborn in each Egyptian home died in the final plague. Then the children of Israel left Egypt that same day. And the children of Israel journeyed from Ramses to Succoth. On that very same day, it came to pass that all the armies of the Lord went out from the land of Egypt. On the day of Passover, the children of Israel crossed the canals of the Nile and became an organized unit at Succoth. They had left the country of Egypt proper, but they were still in territory controlled by the Egyptians. So God led the people around by way of the wilderness of the Red Sea. The wilderness of the Red Sea is what we call today the Sinai Peninsula, which is surrounded on two sides by the Red Sea. It was through the northern region of the peninsula that they traveled day and night, making their rapid escape from the hands of Pharaoh. During the day, they were shaded by the pillar of cloud that would have also provided moisture for them. At night, the pillar of fire would have given them light for their journey. At Etham, they turned south and headed through the mountains in the wilderness of the Red Sea, traveling through a narrow canyon, then stopping at the Red Sea. This expanse of water is called the Gulf of Aqaba today, but in Moses' day, it was called the Red Sea. King Solomon also built a fleet of ships at Ezion-Geber, which is near Elath, on the shore of the Red Sea, in the land of Edom. Ancient Elath is modern-day Eilat, Israel. Our modern Gulf of Aqaba is the ancient Red Sea, or Yam Suf. This is the beach where the children of Israel were trapped with nowhere to escape. The Egyptian army was fast approaching, and it appeared death was imminent. The children of Israel cried out, "Because there were no graves in Egypt, have you taken us away to die in the wilderness? Why have you so dealt with us to bring us out of Egypt?" The children of Israel were already out of Egypt when they were preparing to cross the Red Sea. This would exclude any crossing of the Bitter Lakes or the Gulf of Suez. It was at this site that God was preparing to demonstrate to His people a great miracle that would prove His loving care for them. This is the large beach on the Gulf of Aqaba, called Nuweiba, Egypt. This is where it appeared that the forces of darkness were about to be triumphant, but God was in control. Across the Gulf is the land of Midian and the holy mountain of God. They were to camp between Migdol and the sea, Migdol meaning a fortified city or tower. At the north end of the beach are the remains of an ancient fort, still partially standing today. It was once a 3-story structure, capable of housing hundreds of Egyptian soldiers who could have prevented any northern escape from the beach. The location is precisely at the narrowest point of land, between the mountains and the sea, in order to control the movement of travelers through the area. The fortress today is receiving a fresh coat of stucco, which is unfortunately covering up the original stone blocks. At the front of the fortress, we were able to see the stonework that formed the entrance into the structure. In the middle of the courtyard, we can see an ancient well that would have supplied the fresh water for the many Egyptian soldiers that were housed here. Outside, we can see how tall the structure had been in its former days, a full 3 stories in height. Another description of the location for the Red Sea crossing was Camp before Pi-Hahiroth, which means mouth of a hole or canyon. As the children of Israel entered the beach, they had made their way through a system of canyons or wadis and encountered this beach at the Red Sea. The Bible tells us, "They are entangled in the land, the wilderness hath shut them in." They had finally made it through the canyons that snaked their way through the mountains, but now they were trapped on the beach. And the angel of God who went before the camp of Israel moved and went behind them, and the pillar of cloud went from before them and stood behind them. So it came between the camp of the Egyptians and the camp of Israel. It was here that the pillar of cloud blocked the Egyptians from advancing toward the children of Israel. For there was on each side a ridge of mountains that terminated at the sea, which were impassable by reason of their roughness, and obstructed their flight. There must have been excitement as they reached the beach at the sea, but that soon turned to gloom as they discovered their plight. They were trapped on the beach, awaiting their death at the hands of Pharaoh. From the middle of the beach, we can see the opening of Pi-Hahiroth in the distance, but we head south in order to locate an amazing marker here at the beach. Near the road, we see this large pillar which was found by Ron Wyatt in 1978 during his first visit to this beach. It had fallen down and was lying in the edge of the water, but today it is about 500 feet from the sea and has been set in concrete. The unique features of the red granite pillar include the fact that it is of Phoenician or Hebrew design and is 3,000 years old. It was placed here for a reason, to mark the location of the crossing of the Red Sea on dry ground. This pillar is even mentioned in the Bible, a pillar to the Lord at its, Egypt's border. At the south end of the beach is where we can see the pillar. A matching column on the other side of the Gulf in Saudi Arabia was found by Ron Wyatt in 1984 and was shown to Saudi authorities. On the Saudi pillar were Hebrew inscriptions which included the words Pharaoh, Mizraim or Egypt, Moses, death, water, Yahweh, Solomon, and Edom. The inscriptions on this column have been removed, since the Egyptians living here were not excited about a Hebrew celebration marker, located in their own backyard. Using Google Earth, one can zoom in on the beach here and spot the pillar standing near the road. This is an exciting use of technology to see the Bible come alive. The pillar stands here today as a testimony of truth, marking the location of the Red Sea crossing. From here, we can see the water that presented itself as an obstacle to the children of Israel. A short distance downhill, we come to the edge of the water where a wonderful miracle took place, where the Lord provided protection to His people, even though they were angry and complaining. Are you not the one who dried up the sea, the waters of the great deep, that made the depths of the sea a road for the redeemed to cross over? For centuries, this beach has been named for the crossing of the Red Sea at this exact spot. On Google Earth, we can see the name Nuweiba at this point on the beach. This older, detailed map reveals to us the complete name of the beach. Nuweiba is short for Nuweiba al-Muzayina. The name on this beach, Nuweiba al-Muzayina, gives us confirmation that we are in the correct location. The translation of that name means waters of Moses opening. This is where the waters opened by the hand of God. The Lord demonstrated to his people that he would be their protector and deliverer in times of trouble. Through divine providence, we have confirmation that we are at the correct location. Moses once stood here with the children of Israel, and the water was opened before them by the hand of God. An amazing testimony of truth. Depth charts of the Gulf of Aqaba show the Eilat Deep to the north and the Aragonese Deep to the south. Between these two deep areas is a path through the sea. When Ron Wyatt was at this spot in 1978, he decided to inspect the waters here for any evidence that may have been left behind from approximately 20,000 chariots, plus the horses, horsemen, and foot soldiers. What he found has been confirmed by others. Diving in the water here is extremely easy, since the water is very clear, with high visibility. Investigations have revealed artifacts which confirm our previous conclusions about the site. The sea floor is smooth and contains gradual contours. Our first artifact to inspect is this chariot wheel that still has 3 of its 4 spokes, plus the hub is extending upward. We see 90-degree angles here, which are a sign of man-made structure. The Lord looked down upon the army of the Egyptians, and he took off their chariot wheels. The chariot wheel with 6 spokes was the most widely used by the Egyptians. Egyptian chariots were known to use metal hubs in the center of the wheels. Using metal detectors, divers have found metal in the raised hubs that are now covered in coral. Here we see another 4-spoked chariot wheel with 1 spoke missing and a center raised hub. The coral here has preserved the chariot parts by retaining the man-made structure, even after the wood has disappeared. Here we see another wheel suspended on its axle, standing at attention. It has 6 spokes and a raised center hub. Ron Wyatt made many dives here and located many artifacts. This could have once been a chariot cab. This appears to be another round chariot wheel. Horse remains have also been found here, such as this shrunken hoof. Horses are not in the Sinai Peninsula today. Human remains have also been found, such as this coral-covered femur bone on the right. Lab tests confirmed that it is in fact bone. Other bones have also been found. A cross-section reveals the bone inside the coral. Here we see a chariot wheel standing on its axle in this old 1978 footage shot by Ron Wyatt. Next, we see an 8-spoke wheel with 1 spoke missing. 8-spoke wheels were only used during the 18th dynasty, the time of the Exodus. The premier find here at the crossing site is this gold veneer that was left behind from a 4-spoke chariot wheel. The Bible tells us there were 600 choice chariots used in the chase of the children of Israel. This artifact was left behind at a depth of 200 feet. Since specialized equipment would be necessary to raise it to the surface, today it is still in the location where it was found. Since there are chariot parts on this side of the Red Sea crossing, could there be other chariot parts on the other side of the Gulf, showing a continuation of artifacts? On the shore opposite of Nuweiba, inspection of the seafloor in Saudi Arabia has also been conducted to see if chariot parts can be found on this side of the Red Sea crossing. While investigating the Saudi Arabian waters, Viveka Pontian found this beautiful round chariot wheel specimen with a raised center hub. This is confirmation of the chariot parts continuing to the other side of the crossing site, opposite Nueva. By confirming the location of the Red Sea crossing, one is then able to conclude without a doubt that the real Mount Sinai must be over in Saudi Arabia, in Midian, just as the Bible says. Mount Sinai. At age 40, Moses killed the Egyptian and was forced to flee for his life. Moses fled from the face of Pharaoh and dwelt in the land of Midian. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian, and he led the flock to the back of the desert and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. Older maps will reveal that Midian is in northwest Saudi Arabia. This is where we should find the mountain of God today. Moses was tending sheep when he encountered a mysterious burning bush that was not being consumed. The Lord said to Moses, "When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you shall serve God on this mountain." Paul, in the New Testament, told us the location of Mount Sinai in Arabia. Josephus told us Mount Sinai is the highest of mountains in the region of the city of Midian. This is our destination, the real Mount Sinai in Saudi Arabia, and is named today Jebel al-Lawz. Herschel Shanks, editor of the Biblical Archaeology Review, stated, "Jebel al-Lawz is the most likely site for Mount Sinai." From the Saudi shore at the Gulf of Aqaba, we first inspect the remains of the pillar that once had Hebrew inscriptions on it, but was removed by the Saudis after Ron Wyatt showed it to the authorities. Today, a Red Sea coastal survey plate marks the location of the column. Our first destination is Elim, where the children of Israel would find water to drink. Then they came to Elim, where there were 12 wells of water and 70 palm trees, so they camped there by the waters. Using Google Earth, we are able to zoom in to the location of Elim. It stands out with all the green palm trees grouped together in the canyon or wadi. On the ground, we can see the circular wells still in operation today. Of course, there are more than 70 palm trees here today, but amazingly, 12 wells are still here at Elim. The children of Israel would have been stretched out through the canyons here for a great distance, but they would have access to the drinking water at these wells. And they journeyed from Elim, and all the congregation of the children of Israel came to the wilderness of Sin, which is between Elim and Sinai. Next, the children of Israel traveled through the wilderness of Sin and murmured against Moses. The Lord lovingly provided them with manna every day, except the Sabbath. On a detailed map next to the town of Al-Bad, or ancient Midian, we can see Mughayir Shu'aib, meaning the caves of Jethro. Here we see the name Jethro listed on the map. The facades of these caves were carved by the Nubidians in more recent times, 2,000 years ago, but the inner caves themselves date back to the time of the Exodus and Jethro, 3,500 years ago. And the Lord said to Moses, "Behold, I will stand before you there on the rock at Horeb, and you shall strike the rock, and water will come out of it, that the people may drink. Northwest of Jebel el-Lawz is the rock of Horeb that we will explore next. Standing on the crest of a hill, the singular rock stands 50 feet tall and can easily be seen from a great distance. As the people complained once again, asking for water, the Lord heard their cries, and he commanded Moses to strike the rock. Then water gushed out in abundance. The rock was split down the middle, from top to bottom, by the hand of God. Erosion can be seen around the rock from millions of gallons of water flowing out into the nearby camp. He opened the rock and water flowed out. The fissure is so large, one can walk through the split in the rock. The rocks below show clear signs of water erosion. And Moses built an altar and called its name, "The Lord is my banner." Here in the encampment is a large square altar assembled with uncut stones and was built after the defeat of the Amalekites. Also in the encampment are the remains of these circular formations of stone used around the base of their tents. This is clear evidence of prior occupation at this site. Our next destination is Jebel el-Lawz, or Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. As we pan across the mountains, we see the peak of Mount Sinai that was burned by the presence of God. The blackened peak of Mount Sinai marks the location where the mountain was on fire. Mount Sinai was completely in smoke because the Lord descended upon it in fire. Its smoke ascended like the smoke of a furnace, and the whole mountain quaked greatly. To the right of the peak is the location of Elijah's cave. It is extremely rare for anyone to obtain video of the mountain, since entering Saudi Arabia is very difficult, and they are guarding this mountain from those who would photograph it. Near the base of the mountain are the guardhouse and fence, which surround the area where many artifacts are located that help to authenticate the site. This Saudi sign states, "Archaeological area, warning, unlawful to trespass. Violators are subject to penalties passed by royal decree." Using Google Earth, one can zoom in and see the guardhouse and fence, which are next to the sign. In the encampment area are many inscriptions, including this wonderful image of a menorah, which is undoubtedly the oldest ever found. Also found in the encampment was this broken millstone that would have ground up the manna that was collected. And Moses wrote all the words of the Lord, and he rose early in the morning and built an altar at the foot of the mountain, and 12 pillars according to the 12 tribes of Israel. Google Earth shows us the altar at the base of the mountain with an animal pen next to it that would have held animals to be sacrificed. Here we can see an entrance into the animal pen. The remains of pillars are in this area also. Some pillars are white in color, while others have more of a granite appearance, and are very large in diameter, as we can see here. From this same area, one can look upward and see the burned and blackened peak. The rock has literally been burned from the intense heat. When Moses was on the mountain with God, a golden calf was built in the camp by a rebellious group. As Moses was descending the mountain, he saw the people dancing around the golden calf. Here we can see the encampment from the mountain and the location of the altar for the golden calf. Using Google Earth, we can zoom in on the large boulders which comprise the base of the altar. On the ground, we can see the massive large boulders and the fence erected by the Saudi authorities in an effort to preserve this site. Again, we have the government sign warning visitors to keep out. It was on top of these large boulders that the golden calf was placed. 11 of the 12 tribes, save the tribe of Levi, danced around the golden calf in rebellion to God. Panning from Mount Sinai, we peer through the fence and see amazing images that are inscribed on the rocks. Egyptian-style figures of the Egyptian god Hathor have been placed here like graffiti. The bull was placed in high esteem in Egypt, where the children of Israel had just left, so they created images that came natural to their rebellious heart. These images were inscribed here because the golden calf was resting here at the time. These inscriptions are unique to Saudi Arabia, according to a Saudi archaeologist. Mount Sinai was first discovered in 1984 by Ron Wyatt and his sons, who walked across the border into Saudi Arabia without a visa in order to document the evidence here. After seeing the mountain, he and his sons were captured and were accused of espionage. They spent 78 days in prison, awaiting execution, before they were finally released. Here, they were interviewed by CBS television. As the day ends at Mount Sinai, there is a new chapter to investigate: the Ark of the Covenant, which was built right here at this mountain 3,500 years ago. It was here that God directed Moses to bring the children of Israel back to this mountain so that they could worship together in spirit and truth. It was a divine appointment where man was granted a beautiful opportunity to meet with his Creator in the encampment where they would dwell. God arranged a loving appointment, sent down from heaven above. God handed down the 10 Commandments, written with His own finger. It was a law of love of God, and love of our fellow man. The earthly sanctuary was to be built from the heavenly pattern, with each object representing the plan of salvation. Near the gate to the courtyard, a lamb would be killed by a repentant sinner, and its blood collected by the priest. The body of the sacrifice would be placed on the brazen altar. The priest would then place blood on the horns of the altar. The priest would then wash his hands and feet at the laver of water. Then he would enter the first apartment, called the Holy Place. In here are 3 important objects: the golden lampstand, which represents the Holy Spirit, the truth, and Jesus, the light of the world. Next, the table of showbread, which represents the bread of life, Jesus. The priest would then place blood on the horns of the altar of incense and cast blood upon the veil, which represents Jesus' flesh. And once a year, the high priest would enter the most holy place to sprinkle blood on the east side of the mercy seat of the Ark of the Covenant, while the bright Shekinah, glory of God, hovered over the Ark. God came down to earth for us so we could be His special people. The 10 Commandments given to Moses were inside the Ark of the Covenant. This was the earthly throne of God. Jesus is the Lamb of God, the sacrifice offered up under the new covenant to atone for our sins. The Ark of the Covenant. As we look at an old map of Jerusalem, we can see the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, situated well inside the city walls. This is the traditional Catholic and Greek Orthodox site of Jesus' crucifixion and burial. The site for the church was chosen in the 4th century by the Roman Emperor Constantine's self-proclaimed psychic mother, Helena, who was attracted to the site because the Temple of Venus was at this location. As we enter the building, we can see a mural of the crucifixion and burial of Christ. Upon entering the rotunda, we can look up to see the dome with the rays of the sun on the ceiling. Then we pan down to see the tomb. We ponder the question, is this the correct location for Jesus' crucifixion and burial? Does this site match the biblical account? As we make our way to the exit, we see the adoration of the stone of anointing, where some think Jesus' body was prepared for burial. From the church, we will be heading north towards the Damascus Gate. We're traveling through a Muslim bazaar, and it's Friday, so the Muslims are streaming into the city for worship. Our destination is an alternative location for Jesus' crucifixion site, one that is outside the city. John chapter 19 states, "For the place where Jesus was crucified was near the city." This tells us he was executed outside the city walls. Approaching the Damascus Gate on the north side of the city, it is the most beautiful of Jerusalem's 11 gates. These walls were constructed in the 16th century by the Ottoman Turk Suleiman I. This map indicates the current walls follow the line of the old walls from Jesus' day. Making our way through the large gate, we continue to meet worshipers entering the city. We can see the ornate structure of the walls, and as we glance down, the base of the walls from 31 AD can still be seen today. From here, we will head northeast a short distance to the area identified as Jeremiah's Grotto. It is there that we can see the place of the skull, which was discovered in the late 19th century. We are walking just a short distance north along Nablus Road. Next, we turn east onto Conrad Schick and make our way to the Garden Tomb grounds. And he, bearing his cross, went out to a place called the Place of a Skull, which is called in Hebrew Golgotha, where they crucified him. Making our way through the garden, we come to an observation deck overlooking the Place of the Skull. We can see the two eye sockets and the nose. A side profile of the skull clearly shows us a definite nose bridge. We make our way back to the garden area. Now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb in which no one had yet been laid. There is evidence of this area having been a garden in Jesus' day. Here we see this ancient wine press, which is the third largest in the Jerusalem area. Undoubtedly, a vineyard must have been in this area. Another element, which indicates this area was a garden in biblical times, is this ancient water cistern from the pre-Christian era, capable of holding 250,000 gallons of water. The depth of the cistern is 31 feet, its width 29 feet, and its length 65 feet. We can get a size perspective from this photo taken inside the cistern. Now, we finally make our way to the garden tomb, where many guests have come to this special place. The tomb was discovered in 1867, then researched extensively in 1883 by General Charles Gordon, who associated it with the place of the skull and the area of Jesus' crucifixion. We are told in the Bible that Joseph of Arimathea was a rich man, and thus we can expect the tomb he had constructed would be quite extravagant and large. There are several ancient crosses associated with the tomb. The largest cross is to the right of the tomb and was cut out of the escarpment. To the left of the entrance to the tomb is a simple anchor cross. Another interesting feature is this depression, which has been cut out of the bedrock for early Christians to sit on the stone ledge and practice the service of humility, or foot washing. A large stone would have been rolled in this track and would have covered the entrance to the tomb. And he laid him in a tomb, which had been hewn out of the rock, and rolled a stone against the door of the tomb. So they went and made the tomb secure, sealing the stone. To the left of the tomb entrance is the end of a broken iron shaft that was driven into the escarpment by Roman guards to prevent the stone from being rolled backwards and opening the tomb. On resurrection morning, a powerful heavenly angel easily broke off this iron rod and rolled the stone back, opening the tomb. But when they looked up, they saw that the stone had been rolled away, for it was very large. Measuring the distance between the iron rod and the stone ledge to the right, the distance is 13 feet. This would be the size of the extremely large rolling stone. As we enter the tomb, the first chamber to our left is the weeping chamber. As we look to the right, we can see one crypt that has been used. The area for the feet was cut out, lengthening the space for burial. This is where the Son of God rested after having lived a selfless and sinless life for us. To the right is an unused crypt. Then we pan back over to the used crypt where angels sat at either end after Christ had risen. Jesus is risen. He is our substitute and Redeemer. Praise the Lord. Now, in the place where he was crucified, there was a garden, and in the garden a new tomb, in which no one yet been laid. From this we know the crucifixion site was near a garden and a tomb, the areas we've been inspecting thus far. So this is what we have: Golgotha, the place of the skull, to our right, and the garden tomb to our left, and in between we have the crucifixion site of Christ. Jerusalem was built on Mount Moriah, outlined here in blue. This is where God asked Abraham to sacrifice Isaac 2,000 years before Christ. God instead offered his own son to be sacrificed on this same mountain. The area outlined in green is the northern portion of the mountain and the highest area of Moriah, where Golgotha is located. This area is of special interest. The limestone escarpment shown here has Roman cutouts in the stone that were used during crucifixions. To the left is a horizontal slot where the Roman army standard would have been displayed. The large cutout is where a sign would have been placed: Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. It has an arched top and a flat shelf. Our Ark Discovery International team found similar cutouts in Israel. At Caesarea Philippi, they had a curved top and a flat shelf where signs or objects were placed. The earth quaked, and the rocks were split. A large fissure or crack in the escarpment starts at the top of the escarpment and then extends down the face of the rock. Today, part of the fissure has been filled in. It connects with the cutouts where the signs were placed. We now present the most important material on earth, the discovery of the Ark of the Covenant and the evidence it holds. Although photographs of this find will not be shown today, we do have the faithful witness of Ron Wyatt, whose credibility was established through the other discoveries we have already seen thus far. The Lord used Mr. Wyatt to find other discoveries, so we can trust his testimony regarding this most important find. In God's appointed time, we will all see this incredible discovery. Here now is Ron Wyatt and the Ark of the Covenant.
I had had an unusual experience. The Lord had helped me find the remains of Noah's Ark. He had helped me find the remains of Egyptian chariot parts and horse parts and people parts in the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba. And I had gone to the Middle East with my sons. We had trained as divers, scuba divers, and we were going to get some of those chariot parts out. Well, due to my carelessness, I got sunburned to the point that my legs swelled up, my feet, and all of this, and I couldn't get my diving equipment on. So I was up in Jerusalem hobbling around, feeling very, very rained on, waiting for my cheap airline ticket, the date that was on it, to arrive so we could fly home. We didn't have the money to change the ticket. And during this time, I was hobbling around the city a little bit. And one day I met this archaeologist who was in charge of the Jerusalem area there. And why he should be talking to me, I don't have a clue. I didn't look very presentable. We were staying in a youth hostel, sleeping in our clothes. I'm sure I didn't smell very good. Maybe I was fortunate enough that he was upwind from me or something. But anyway, we got into a conversation, and I told him about Noah's Ark, and then I explained to him how the pyramids were built, and that seemed to get his attention. So he says, I've been doing some digging along this cliff face here. He says, how about coming along with me and have a look at it and see what you think? So I was walking along, looking. These were Roman ruins and remains. And my left hand suddenly pointed out at a grubby-looking hole in the rock where there was garbage, 2 dead cats, shall we say, nasty stuff. And my mouth said, that's Jeremiah's grotto, and the Ark of the Covenant is in there. This guy said, that's wonderful. He said, we will let you excavate there, and we'll provide you a place to stay, your food, your laundry. I can, understand why he mentioned laundry. But I couldn't understand a Jewish person being that generous. That's not their nature. And I was stunned because I had not been thinking about the Ark of the Covenant at all. Wondering why on earth we hadn't been able to get some chariot wheels out. You see, I pray about everything, folks. I did back then, too. I knew I was supposed to be there. But what I thought I was supposed to be there for was not what I was supposed to be there for. So anyway, our ticket was due to the date it finally arrived, and that was the next morning after we had this conversation, or after I had the conversation with this man. So I said, well, that's great, I'll come back and do that. Now I've got to go home, you know, and make some preparations. So anyway, I went home wondering why on earth the Ark of the Covenant could possibly be in that place. So I read in in 2 Kings chapter 25, where it says that the whole city was surrounded by a siege wall. So anyway, I became persuaded that the Ark of the Covenant was indeed in that place, because I knew some supernatural force had used my arm and my voice. When it first happened, I didn't know which one. And we're instructed to try the spirits to see whether they be of God. We can't flatter ourselves and say anything